Hello there, friends and neighbors. This is me, Stella Hendricks. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel once again. I'm super excited for today's Playmate review, Playboy review. Well, there's a Playmate in there too, usually more than one. This is the January 1966 Playboy, and I have a suspicion that I'm gonna have to break this particular review up into two pieces because it's gonna be too long. So I'm just gonna keep filming this until I get to approximately 45 minutes and or a good stopping point in here, because there were so many things in here that were just fascinating to me. This is really one of my favorite Playboys that I've ever come across. I think the photography from the 1970s Playboys are my favorite, artistically speaking, except for when you get into like the later 2000s, because honestly, Holly Madison's pictures and like her era were just spectacular, every bit as good as the pictures from the 70s. But the content of the magazines and like the writing style, I find the 60s to be superior and charming. It's very fun. It seems to be a little less serious, and it's really intriguing to think of like how new all these ideas were at the time. The 60s are such a fascinating decade in history. So there's not really a hidden bunny on the front of this one. He's just sitting right there. And they used this funny looking guy as their mascot until they designed the bunny head logo, which I think was designed by a gentleman whose name I cannot recall at this moment, but it was kind of like a first draft thing. It was a stroke of genius, and it hasn't been changed since it was designed. So whoever that guy was, great job. And it's a peekaboo issue. Hello. I just think that's fun. Okay, let's see. Okay, the first thing we have to talk about is this hysterical ad. Let me read, what does it say? Wild is the word for the uninhibited jungle beat of Tigress Parfum Extraordinaire, made in France by Fabergé. Does that name sound familiar? Fabergé? It should, because, well, if you're a history nerd like me, it should. It was the name of the company that made the very famous Romanov Fabergé eggs. I think they actually ended up making some eggs as well for some American tycoons, Rockefellers or something. But traditionally, and when we talk about the Fabergé eggs, we're talking about the royal eggs of Russia. I am obsessed with them. That's why I have these beautiful little knockoff Fabergé eggs that are my, they're actually little, what do you call it, jewelry boxes. Oh, look, I have my Princess Diana earrings in my Fabergé eggs. And this one's the best one because traditionally the Fabergé eggs had little presents in them. Oh, there we go. Like this one does. A little rosebud inside. My middle name is Rose, and Rosebud is a nickname of mine. And inside of that, yet another tiny little Fabergé egg. Let me see, there you go. Isn't that fun? Isn't that delightful? If you have a girl in your life who is a history nerd or just likes little things like that, I bet she would be delighted if you would get her, well, any of these little Fabergé egg jewelry boxes, but if it's one with a little surprise in it, oh my God. The sex will be hot that night if you give her that present. Anyways, hey, okay, this brand Fabergé, is it the same Fabergé? Yes and no. What happened after the Russian Revolution, pretty much all culture and beauty in Russia went right down the drains, and they were miserable and starving and socialist for the rest of their existence, and they still kind of are today. And that business, Fabergé, went back to France, except for the guy, Carl Fabergé, the boss. I think he probably died tragically, I'm not 100% sure, but not a lot of happy stories coming out of Russia around that time. Well, the company nobody really owned it, and somebody realized that the Fabergé name was up for purchase. So the owner of the brand, the owner of the company, the company traded hands, and they pretty much started putting out perfumes. I think they had a couple other small, like, kind of luxury items, but they realized that that name, Fabergé, had a tremendous pull on the imagination and on people's opinions of what quality you could expect from Fabergé. So the company has now been rebought nowadays. This was, again, remember, in the 60s. And today they have primarily jewelry, very high-end stuff. They're kind of back to their roots, as it were. But it always makes me laugh whenever I see these old Fabergé perfume advertisements. I think that's just a delightful little piece of history there. Let's see. Oh, dreadful. Okay, I love these old advertisements, but how unfortunate. This is Old Hickory, I think bourbon, probably, yeah, bourbon. Because Old Hickory was the nickname, if you do not know, of Andrew Jackson, who they have him here, and he's still on the $20 bill. I am perfectly scandalized, I must tell you. He was not a good fellow. I just finished reading this book about the Native Americans. I'm trying to remember what was the name of the book. I read a couple of them, actually. Well, I listened to them, audiobook. I'm much better at listening to books than actually like reading them. And I knew a lot about history. I knew a lot about the Indian Wars and about the very unfortunate history behind all the Native American stuff. But this went a little more in depth with Andrew Jackson. And he is not a nice guy, you guys. If you don't know about Andrew Jackson, you should find out. He's like Christopher Columbus status. Not as bad as Christopher Columbus, but he's up there. He's not someone who we need to have statues of. This I will say. So hopefully Old Hickory Bourbon has found a new mascot. Okay, here we have the Playmate perfume. Bring out the Playmate in her. Give her Playboy perfume. You see that girl right there? That beautiful blonde, I believe, is Cynthia Maddox, who is Hef's at this time girlfriend. We'll see her a little bit later in another issue. She has fabulous hair. And I love that perfume. I'm such a sucker for advertising. I would totally get Playboy perfume just because it says Playboy on there. Not all the time, but I would have to have, you know, one for my collection. So here's another lovely advertisement. This one I actually do like. This is for whiskey. It has a fantastic, beautiful picture of a sailing ship behind it. What is that, a frigate? I have no idea, honestly. I just know it's a big ship from ye olden days. And it reminded me of this painter, Montague, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Dawson. And I think he was from like back in the 50s or 40s. He was back in the day. And he painted a lot of these beautiful sailing ships. I know about him because my grandma, Nanny, I called her, she has passed away, but she had these beautiful paintings of Montague Dawson's up on her walls, and one of them was a rear view of a ship as it was sailing in the night under a crescent moon. In fact, I think the name of the painting is Crescent Moon. You should look it up. It's very mysterious, very beautiful, and it reminds me very much of this advertisement. So that was just a lovely memory that it popped up for me. Oh, this one's all the alcohol advertisements these days. This is like the theme of the magazine right now. Okay, this is for Gordon's Gin. I'm not a huge gin lover. It always gives me a freaking hangover. But look at this lord over here, this fat lord from England. I feel like that's an offensive caricature that an American would make about a Brit. Yeah, that's... I don't know. Oh, God. Good times, good times. God, I can't laugh too much or I turn like red. I turn purple, friends. It's a true story. It is a first world problem, but it is a problem. Okay, this lady is just so gorgeous. She has captured my imagination. Again, another alcoholic beverage advertisement. That's okay. We're just not paying attention to that. Look at her hair. Look at this beautiful crescent moon. Ooh, that's another motif that keeps showing up, huh? I didn't plan that. A crescent moon in her hair. Doesn't she look so witchy? Doesn't she look so elegant? I really love that. And she kind of reminds me of like Empress Sisi, who I am using as a bookmark today. Actually, this is a postcard I got from my little sister, who is currently a au pair in Austria. Isn't she fantastic? And she sent me this words postcard, and I'm going to use it later on for helping me to keep my place as I read, because I'm going to do a lot of reading actually in just a minute. So anyway, last time, there she is, beautiful girl, moon in her hair. Oh, Empress Sisi, there's a very famous picture of her, not here, but she has all these stars in her hair. And I love to wear stars in my hair. Usually it's as an homage or a tribute or whatever to Star Stowe. But also, it's just so funny that there's this very famous picture of Empress Sisi with the stars in her hair. Empress Sisi is also one of my starlets and harlots. And you see that look recreated. Vivian Leigh, in the Phantom of the Opera, that girl, Emmy Rossum has her hair like that. But it's just gorgeous. And it's fun to see it pop up every here and there in pop culture, where it pops up in pop culture. Okay, so this makes me laugh. They always say, your last chance. It's your last chance to get, what are you talking about? You guys are out of your mind. If Playboy ever says it's your last chance, don't listen to them. They say that in about every magazine of theirs. What are you talking about? The gentlemanly privileges and pleasures of relaxing in your very own club. Man-sized potables. I think that means booze, right? Brewed with 1.5 ounces plus of the finest liquors and served to you by the Playboy Club's bunnies. Outstanding entertainment by such stars as Tony Bennett, Gary Crosby, I wonder if he's related to Bing Crosby, and Dizzy Gillespie. Special events for key holders only, such as golf tourneys, fashion shows, and Meet the Playmates. A subscription to VIP, the club's own magazine. I just found out about that magazine, VIP. Very exciting. Just more things for me to dive into to get the feel of, vintage Playboy. Also, this is so interesting to me because last night I was watching on Netflix the D.B. Cooper show, the documentary. Why can I not use my words today? I don't know. And it talked about how that main suspect, Robert Rickshaw, hang on, I wrote it down. Robert Rackstraw. I can't remember his name for some reason. Robert Rackstraw, that he was a member of the Playboy Club. And I just thought that was so funny because this idea behind D.B. Cooper and what a James Bond-esque figure he is. Having watched all of those old retro, I'm still finishing, I'm in the 80s now, watching all those old James Bond movies and just sort of seeing this international man of mystery, Don Draper type of idea as an archetype, certainly, that our society would look up to, or at least sort of an anti-hero, if not a hero exactly. But anti-heroes are always more interesting, aren't they? I think they are. But I just thought, that's such a perfect character development. And if I was making a movie about this guy, he would definitely have a scene where he's in the Playboy Club, with his tie, drinking a bourbon and soda, or scotch and whatever in the hell he ordered, I forget. But I thought that was so interesting. Personally, I gotta say, I don't think that Robert Rackstraw, I don't think that he was actually D.B. Cooper. I kind of go for the idea that it was someone with French-Canadian heritage because of the comic books and the Dan Cooper character. How fascinating. If you guys haven't watched the D.B. Cooper documentary on Netflix, you need to watch it. Although I do think that Robert Rackstraw wrote those letters to the FBI, and I think that part is true. But I think he was trying to get attention. I don't think he actually did it. You guys should watch it and tell me what you think. How interesting. So that's another reason this is taking so long, because I keep going off on tangents. But I think tangents are kind of fun, right? Okay, now we won't have any tangents for a minute because did you know that Playboy magazine had an interview with real life actual royalty Grace Kelly? Now, I'm not a monarchist and I don't really believe in royalty, but I think there's a lot of nice historical cultural ideas behind it, and it's so cool that an American actress became like royalty of Europe. I just think that's so much fun. I almost thought we were gonna have that with another person, another American actress who recently married into royalty, but I have to tell you how very quickly I became disenchanted with that one, who shall remain nameless for the time being. Not a fan. But of Grace, Princess Grace, I am in fact quite a fan. So because I cannot believe that they have an interview in Playboy with Princess Grace, I'm gonna go ahead and read like most of it actually, because I love it and I think it's so fascinating. And that's another reason why this is gonna take so long. This is probably gonna get split into part 1 and part 2. A candid conversation with the regal consort of Monaco's Prince Rainier. Also, all this Monaco business totally reminds me of The Girls Next Door, particularly Bridget when she goes running after the prince. Oh my god, I'm dying. I love Girls Next Door. I love Bridget Marquardt. She's just a doll. I think she's the funniest. I love Holly Madison. She is so cool and interesting. I think she's very brave. I think she's very talented. I also super love Kendra. I just never connected with her. I'm much more of like a girly girl. I would definitely be on the girly girl train. But anyway, that's what it reminds me of. 10 years ago, in an MGM picture called The Swan, Alex Guinness played the courtly prince to a fairy tale kingdom who marries a beautiful commoner. 5 days after its premiere, the movie's improbable cliche of the storyline was reenacted in real life. Guinness's co-star, a cool blue-eyed blonde named Grace Kelly, gave up her flourishing film career to become the consort of the absolute monarch of the Principality of Monaco, a Grastarchian 390-acre realm half the size of New York's Central Park. That is so tiny. That is so tiny. I know multiple cattle ranches that are bigger than that. That's how big it is? Oh my gosh, wow. Perched scenically on the Côte d'Azur between Nice and the Italian Riviera, bypassed by the tide of world events during most of its 8th century history, tiny Monaco, with its opulent casino, Emerald Harbor and white beaches, had become in recent decades an antiquated, there we go, that's the word, antiquated playground for the diminishing ranks of international cafe society. But when Prince Rainier III announced his storybook betrothal to a regnant queen of Hollywood, the diminutive dominion found itself basking suddenly in the unfamiliar glare of worldwide publicity. Its huge palace, once described by Alfred Hitchcock as run-down post office. Alfred Hitchcock, what a dick, was redecorated for the royal wedding. The pitted streets of Monte Carlo were patched and festooned with bunting, and hundreds of newsmen, photographers, and TV camera crews and rubbernecking tourists descended on Monaco to watch, along with the Principality's 27,000 inhabitants, as the sole surviving scion of the ancient house of Grimaldi, a holder of 139 titles, bestowed a new one on his 26-year-old bride from Philadelphia, Her Most Serene Highness, Princess Grace of Monaco. I always like that one, Her Most Serene Highness. Isn't that nice? Her Serene Highness. Look at us, I'm so serene. Okay. Dang it, I lost my place, and that's exactly why I did this, so I wouldn't get, okay. It was to be her most demanding role, but one for which she might almost be said to have been typecast, by nature as well as by MGM. Though not a blue blood, her Irish father, despite a self-made $18 million fortune, wowzer, had begun his contracting career as a lowly bricklayer. Oh, my grandfather started off as a bricklayer. He didn't make $18 million, but he made a little bit. She was born with a patrician profile. What is that? And a demure demeanor that gentle rearing and genteel schooling refined into any well-bred bearing as finely honed as the mainline debutantes. Refusing to content herself like so many of her finishing school mates with the postgraduate role of social butterfly, she set out to New York at 17, determined to find herself, and signed up for a 2-year curriculum at the prestigious American Academy of Dramatic Arts, earning her tuition money with part-time photographic modeling for fashion and cosmetic ads. Can you imagine going to New York to study the theater and your day job, instead of waiting tables and shit, is being a model? Oh, I'm just modeling until I can really break into the theater. Yeah, you're definitely a debutante. Long before she was appearing regularly, if only in wallets and in walk-ons and bit parts. Sorry, I'm losing my mind. Making a little money and less impact on the reviewers, but gaining invaluable experience for the bigger and better roles she coveted. They were soon to come. Longing to taste the special excitement of performing before a live audience, but mostly to remain solvent during the rerun season, she deserted the Tube and the Great White Way for a cross-country stint in the summer stock circuit. Graduating to supporting parts, Grace Kelly began to be mentioned and sometimes even applauded by the critics. Then, just before she turned 20, came an early birthday present, a featured role on Broadway opposite Raymond Massey in Strindberg's The Father. Heartbreakingly for her, the play folded after only 2 months, but Grace didn't have long to grieve, for her performance had been seen and appreciated by a man who, though he didn't know it then, was about to rechart the entire course of her life in ways that a Hollywood hack would probably have dismissed as too wildly improbable a plotline for even a children's fairy tale. The man was an executive for 20th Century Fox with a firm, even less than thrilling offer of a very minor speaking part in a B suspense picture called 14 Hours. Though she wasn't enchanted by the thought of abandoning the intellectual ferment of theatrical Manhattan, that means snobbery, for the so-called creative Sahara of the Southern California, she decided to accept the role. She could always act and run, she reasoned. She went to Hollywood and made the movie in 1951, but like so many other screenophobic New York stage folk lured west for a single film, she found herself staying on, at first just for one more picture, a meteor part. This one as the long-suffering Quaker wife of... Let's show you a picture of her again real quick. She looks like my friend Sally from when I was a kid. I was always so jealous of Sally. She was exceptionally beautiful. Of Gary Cooper in High Noon, when this classic Western turned out to be not only a box office smash, but also a resounding critical success, Grace was transfigured almost overnight into a burgeoning movie star. And before you could say hot property, the 22-year-old Irish bricklayer's daughter was signed onto a fat 7-year contract with MGM. After one last futile fling at the Broadway stage, in a turkey ironically entitled To Be Continued, which wasn't, she returned to Hollywood determined to establish her credentials as a screen actress. She did so in her next film, winning an Oscar nomination in 1953 for her subtly modulated performance in Mongambo, the provocative hypotenuse of a triangle between a predatory white hunter, Clark Gable, appropriate role for him, I'm not a Clark Gable fan, and her ineffectual husband on an African safari. Next came a pair of Alfred Hitchcock thrillers, both in 1954. Dial M for Murder, in which she played the intended victim of a homicidal husband, and Rear Window. Yes, I love Rear Window. in which she flirted with death yet again, this time at the hands of a psychotic wife dismemberer as James Stewart's intrepid girlfriend and partner in crime detection. Also, James Stewart always plays the crabbiest guy in all of the Alfred Hitchcock films. It cracks me up. James Stewart always sits around frowning and gloomily bullying all the women around him, while they all give him the James Bond treatment and are just like, oh, I love you, darling. God, thank God the 50s are over, huh? Oh my God, none of those girls would like you now. In crime detection, the charismatic combination of freshness, ladylike virtue, and underlying sex appeal which she exudes with such style and such self-assurance, as one critic described it, had already become her trademark for millions of movie fans. In her very next film, however, as if to confound their expectations, and those of reviewers who had become fond of saying things about her like, though Miss Kelly has little to do but look lovely, she does it with an aristocratic aplomb. She played the dowdy, downbeat title role in The Country Girl. Her depressingly believable performance, oh dear, won her an Academy Award as the Best Actress of 1954. Yeah, for some reason, if you're to be taken seriously, you have to be in a depressing movie, play some depressing part, or write an incredibly depressing book. As long as it is sufficiently depressing, everyone in New York will know that you are brilliant and they will put you all over the magazines. I'm so, whatever. I'm not a depressing role person. Ernest Hemingway, boring, boo. Anyway, that's just my opinion. My silly little girl female opinion. Oh, I need to stop losing my place. Okay, not content with the rest of her well-earned laurels to wait for a good script, she made a fourth picture that year, Green Fire, a steamy jungle potboiler that added a little luster to her stardom. In it, reverting to stereotype as a coolly beautiful but headstrong Brazilian coffee plantation owner, she fought to transcend the banality of the scenario no less valiantly than to tame the wilderness, unfortunately with less success. In The Bridges at Toko-Ri, she fared only slightly better as the demure, dutiful, quietly courageous wife of a Korea jet pilot who was shot down over enemy lines. High Society, her first and only musical comedy, found her cast as a two-dimensional socialite type opposite Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra. Though her best lines were in her profile, she displayed an engaging comic flair that spurred producers to begin offering her light comedy roles as well as straight dramatic parts. But she never got the chance to consider either for later that same year on a trip to Europe. Stopping off in Monaco on a picture-seeking publicity session for Paris Match, she was taken to the palace and introduced as a diplomatic courtesy to Prince Rainier. Despite gushing fan magazine reports to the contrary, no romantic sparks flew at this first brief meeting, though they liked each other well enough to date for 2 or 3 years, enough to date 2 or 3 times before her return to Hollywood. On a state visit to the U.S. a few months later, however, the prince was a house guest in the Kelly home in Philadelphia, and a few weeks after that, their engagement was announced. Wow, that was fast. Then came The Swan, her swan song for the screen, and finally the Cliglet Carnival of the royal wedding. In the decades since that historic day, both Hollywood and Philadelphia have been left far behind. She took naturally and happily to the role of wife and mother, bearing her husband 3 children, including an all-important heir, 7-year-old Prince Albert. That's the one that Bridget and company met when they were in Monaco. But her adjustment has been slow and difficult to the elaborate protocol and politis of princesshood, to the myriad diplomatic burdens and social constraints of her official role as consort, to the parochial atmosphere and attitudes of an old-fashioned European town after a lifetime of the cosmopolitan U.S., and to the impossibility of living like an ordinary citizen, or even like an ordinary ex-movie star. But after 10 years in the role, almost interrupted in 1962 by a brief flirtation with the idea of returning to films for for a one-shot as the star of Hitchcock's Marnie, a scheme vetoed at the last minute by her husband. Friends say she seems, at 36, to have come to terms with her past and present, to have accepted finally the burdens and sacrifices of her new life, to have acquired a new poise, a quiet self-assurance which enables her not only to meet, but to relish her royal responsibilities. Among them is the task of winnowing through the hundreds of interview requests with which she's inundated from all over the world. Her crowded schedule of state duties and monoganesque charity work permits her to accept only a handful of them in the course of the year. Playboy's is one of the few to which she has consented in the recent months. Through her appointments secretary, we were advised that Princess Grace would expect us to call on her at the palace in the late afternoon on a date about 1 month hence, her earliest uncommitted time, when she would be able to share with us hours between tea and cocktails. Arriving at the appointed time, we were ushered into the lavish, high-ceilinged drawing room, where we found the princess, behind horn-rimmed glasses, poring over her correspondence at an antique escritoire. I'm pretty sure that's a writing desk. Looking up as we entered, she removed her horn rims, smiled impersonally, rose from her chair, greeted us, and invited us to take a seat. After a few minutes of polite amenities, her veneer of diplomatic reserve began to dissolve when we discovered that we shared mutual friends in the New York City theater. Ice duly broken, we turned on the tape machine and began the interview. So it goes back and forth, Playboy to Princess Grace, and I'm not gonna read like who is saying what at every given moment because that'll make me crazy, but you could probably pretty much like infer, right? What are your duties and obligations as Monaco's princess? My first duty is as a wife and mother to my children. I also have many official duties. I'm president of the that must be for Monte Carlo, Moneganesque. Yeah, I guess that's how you say people from Monaco. They're not Monacans, they're Moneganesque, unfortunately. Red Cross, and the principality is so small that I am really involved in most of the social and charitable work here as far as children and old people are concerned. I'm also honorary president of the Girl Scouts, and I'm building a new nursery for the children. I'm also interested in promoting handwork by artisans, particularly local crafts such as ceramics, pottery, and hand weaving. Recently, I opened a foundation which will try to promote handicraft. I want to give our artisans the opportunity to show their work. Would you describe for us a day at the palace? Every day is so different. I'll rise fairly early. Often I'll spend the whole day in the office, see my mail, entertain visitors in the afternoon. Monday mornings, I'm concerned with problems of the household, with what receptions are being held that week. We have lunch with our children as often as possible. 3 afternoons a week, I receive people who have requested audiences for one reason or another. I'm also busy with plans for the celebration of this year's centenary of Monte Carlo, which was created by Prince Charles, my husband's great-great-grandfather. What is the origin of Prince Rainier's family tree? The House of Monaco is that of the Grimaldi family, whose history is linked with the principality. It came into being in Genoa, where the first member of historical note, Otto Cannella, was born around the 11th century. The descendants of Otto took as their family name the name of Otto's youngest son, Grimaldo, who distinguished himself as ambassador to Frederick Barbarossa and Manuel Comnenus, the emperor of Byzantium. At the end of the 13th century, the struggles between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, political factions in Genoa, forced the Grimaldis into exile, and they took refuge in the province. Francois Grimaldi, disguised in a monk's robes, succeeded in infiltrating a group of his partisans into the fortress of Monaco, which they took by surprise. Thus did the Grimaldi family retake possession of the place in which they were found in which they were to found a dynasty. Oh, found a dynasty, okay. The coat of arms of this line of princes, two monks brandishing swords, perpetuates the memory of this event. During the last 100 years, the rulers have been Prince Charles III, Albert I, and Louis II. The destiny of the principality has been in the hands of Prince Rainier III, my husband, since 1949. Who introduced you to your husband? Was there a matchmaker of any sort? Pierre Galante of the French magazine Paris Match was the one who introduced me to the prince. Do you believe in the institution of matchmaking? It depends on the individual. I believe in the timing of people meeting. If I had met the prince 10 years before I met him, it would not have been the same effect. When we met, we were both ready to get married. I think it just happened that way. Your marriage has been described as a fairy tale romance. Has it ever seemed that way to you? I've never seen anything fairy tale-ish about it, no. What was the most unusual gift you received for your wedding? We received everything from 100 chickens. 100 chickens? Didn't Johnny Depp say something about 100 llamas during that recent court debacle with Amber Heard? If anyone invites me to their wedding in the near future, I'm going to bring them 100 chickens. 100 chickens to a lion and a bear. The chickens are gone, but the lion and the bear are still here in the prince's zoo. What happened to the chickens? Okay. Do you feel any animosity towards those royal families who didn't attend the wedding? It made no difference to me. I didn't know them before. With which of the European royal families are you friendly? We're friendly with the Queen of Spain, who is the godmother of our little boy. We're also friendly with the Greek and Romanian royal families. How long did it take you to get used to royal life in Monaco? Well, it was quite a change. I had always lived in big cities. I had also spent nearly 10 years acting. It was quite a change from the actor's life to a civilian life, so to speak. But the biggest change was just being married. This is always the biggest adjustment. There were so many changes to be made all at once. Do you miss the United States? I miss a lot about the United States. Most of all, I miss my family. Has your relationship with your family changed since you became a princess? They probably tease me a little bit more than they used to, but other than that, nothing has changed. We're always teasing one another, mostly my sisters and brother, but I don't get to see them often enough. I also miss lots of my friends back in the US, and I miss a certain American attitude towards things. I enjoy my life here very much, but there is quite a different outlook and a different approach to life in Europe. At times I get homesick for the American approach, which is more direct, a little easier perhaps. Since you aren't a native-born Monegasque, I hate that word, are you regarded by any of your subjects as a foreigner or an outsider? Oh yes, certainly, very much so. People were terribly sweet and wonderful to me when I arrived and greeted me most warmly and affectionately, but there are certain people who would still consider me a foreigner. When I go to New York, head waiters will speak French to me, and when I'm in Europe, they will speak English. Are you fluent in French? I'm still working on it. As a girl born in Philadelphia who's lived in New York and Hollywood, don't you find Monaco at times to be a bit too small and parochial? It does seem small, yes. It is a very small town, and like all small towns, there is often a small town attitude. One is not as free as in a big town. In my position here, everyone knows everything I do at every moment. Does that make you uncomfortable? It's been a little difficult for me to get used to, but I can come and go about Monaco more or less as I like without inconvenience, except in the summertime when a great many tourists and visitors come here. If I take a walk, I'll have 50 or 100 of them trailing me, taking pictures and asking for autographs. Have you ever wished you could just be plain old Grace Kelly again? I have no interest in going back. My life now is too full. I was very plain back in Philadelphia. I don't think I'd like to go back to that again. Before my marriage, I was very much a 20th century modern young woman, very independent, which I enjoyed very much, but too much independence for a woman I don't think always brings happiness. You sure? If your daughter wanted to be a movie star, would you object? I think so, yes, although her father would object to it before I could. This isn't the life one would choose for one's daughter. I know my mother didn't choose it for me. When I was in theater, I longed to be on the stage. I only got into films afterwards. I never understand it, and I kind of hate it a little when you live one kind of life and you say, oh no, I would never want this for my daughter. Don't you want your daughter to live her own life? Don't you want your daughter to make that decision for herself? And if it's such an awful world, what are you doing in it? Why are you I never understood that mentality, never. I was a stripper, and somebody asked me once, oh, well, would you want your daughter to do this? And my answer was, yeah, if that's what she wanted to do, I would make sure that she knew how to do it right, how to be safe, how to be smart, how to be good at it. But yeah, if she wanted to do it, yeah, I want my daughter to do anything that her heart tells her to do. Like, as long as it's responsible and shit, you know? Come on. Princess Grace. Do you ever regret giving up your film career? No, I was only sorry to stop just when I was about to learn what it was all about. But acting is a wonderful career, and I do miss it at times. But my life now is so much fuller in every sense. Then why don't you want your daughter to do... whatever. Do you miss Hollywood? No, I don't. I'd like to see some of my friends there, but as a city, I don't miss it at all. Do you still receive fan mail from the US? Yes, I get quite a bit. I get many requests for pictures, autographs, and so forth, and I fulfill them as best I can. Do you still get movie offers? Yes. Are you ever tempted to accept any of them? Well, I love acting, and I certainly would love to continue, but one has to choose in life. When I was acting, I wasn't a very happy person. It isn't much fun to have success and no one to share it with. Right now, I have a very full and happy life. Much too full and much too busy sometimes. I don't have time for all the things I would like to do. Would your husband oppose your resuming an acting career? Yes, because, first of all, it would be very difficult. I wouldn't have the time. I have 3 children. I have the Red Cross and many other activities. I would just never be able to get 3 months together to go and do a picture. Even if it was shot in Monaco? How can I be a princess in the palace and run down to the set and make a film even in Monaco? It's not possible. Do your children know their mother was a famous movie star? They've seen some of my pictures. They were very pleased and excited about it. They saw High Noon and How to Catch a Thief. Or To Catch a Thief. I love To Catch a Thief. That is a really good one. Except she does seem rather overly tan in that movie. Everyone is a little rather overly tan. They went heavy on the tanning spray with them because they wanted everyone to know how much time these people were spending on the French Riviera. Do you plan to have any more children? I don't know. I have 3 now, which is a nice number, but it would be nice to have more. I don't know. How do you feel about birth control? As a Catholic, I have mixed viewpoints about it. Certainly something will have to be done about it. It's a problem that needs studying, and it's being studied by the Catholic Church very wisely. But I don't think it's something someone can arbitrarily say it should or shouldn't be practiced. It should be left to people to decide for themselves. As adult human beings, we should be able to decide such a personal thing for ourselves. That is right, Princess Grace, right on. Do you think that birth control information should be made available to the general public? Definitely. Do you favor the use of birth control pills? Well, the pill does not exist in France because it is a Catholic country. Those problems are hardly even discussed. Really? Oh my gosh. But I know from English people and my American friends that the pill is being used increasingly by people who can afford to have children. The big problem is for the ignorant masses of people who can't afford to. This is the problem. That's true. That is true. Do you foresee a change in Vatican policy towards birth control? Like the Vatican, but let's see what she says. I don't know, but I hope something will be done for the benefit of the many who really need it. Have you met Pope Paul? No, but I met Pope John. He was a charming man and a wonderful, warm human being full of goodness. Do you think that Pope Paul continues the spirit of liberal reform and brotherhood enunciated by John in his Pacem in Terris? Yes, I do. I thought the Pope's visit to New York was a thrilling and wonderful gesture. I hope and pray that mankind can heed his demand for peace, and I certainly feel that he champions both freedom of religion and tolerance of other faiths. Do you know General de Gaulle? I've met the general on several occasions. He is a great man. I admire him very much. How do you feel about de Gaulle's hostility towards the United States? I am naturally saddened by General de Gaulle's attitude towards the U.S. and strong feelings of anti-Americanism in general that exists in France. Yeah, to this day. I add a little bit in here sometimes. Sorry, I guess I should be more careful and not just my little exclamations. Whatever, that's just me. How do you account for it? These misunderstandings happen because of so many little things, sometimes insignificant ones. For the most part, Frenchmen who have been to the U.S. like Americans, but these are few, alas. Most Frenchmen know Americans only from what they see in Europe, and many people when they travel behave differently than they do when they're at home. That's very true. This pertains to everyone, not only Americans. As a matter of fact, I find the behavior of other nationalities far more tiresome abroad than that of American tourists. I think Americans are often misunderstood. For example, in America, one tries to save time. You cut your telephone conversation short because time is short, and you think you're doing someone a favor if you save him time. The French don't understand this. The more time you give them, the more they like to talk to you, and the more flattering it is. Americans are perhaps a little more direct and abrupt, and the French mistake this for rudeness. That reminds me so much of Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and their experiences in France trying to deal with French diplomacy. And John Adams was a very, get things done, very business-like kind of guy. And Benjamin Franklin was much more of a joie de vivre, I think they would call it. Much more my style, much more of a hef, much more of a hanging out, partying kind of guy. Benjamin Franklin. And yeah, just different strokes for different folks. Different things work differently in different places and different cultures. I find that fascinating. Apart from his attitude towards America, do you think de Gaulle has been a good president? Yes, I think de Gaulle has done a great deal for France and for the Frenchmen. I do not think that there can be a more difficult people to govern. Everyone in France is deeply concerned as to what will happen after de Gaulle. It is a tremendous problem. For one thing, Europeans are reluctant to give responsibility to young men, and for another, the communists in France are well too organized to suit me. Do you know President Johnson? I've met him briefly. What do you think of him? He's a warm person with an outgoing personality, and I think he's a capable executive. But I don't always agree with American foreign policy, so it's difficult for me to comment too much. What in particular don't you agree with? Vietnam. The U.S. has made some bad errors there, as to my way of thinking. I think the Americans were very fooled by Madame New. The newspapers made her out to be a wicked dragon lady, which maybe she was. But was she any worse than those who have followed? And the fact that the Buddhists were infiltrated with communists did not seem to have an effect on the American attitude toward them. And the American role in the coup d'etat there was shocking. So many mistakes have been committed. How does one go back and undo them? If you were in the United States today, would you have joined the students, professors, and others who are advocating that the U.S. pull out of Vietnam? I would have to know more about their motives. What can Americans actually do in Vietnam? At this point, they just can't pull out and go away. So you think the U.S. has a right to be there? Well, someone has to be there. Do you feel that the American policy of escalation in Vietnam is justified? Will it help bring the Viet Cong to the conference table? I don't know. Things are in such a bad way now that I don't know how a satisfactory solution can be found. I leave that to bigger brains than mine. You're a princess. Well, I don't know how or if they're constitutional or what real political power she has. No, don't say that when you're in political power. Your neighbor France favors the admission of Red China to the UN. Do you? I feel it is difficult to ignore a nation of 7 million people, yet one cannot admit them, 700 million people, sorry. One cannot admit them on their terms. I am only bewildered as to why Red China would like to be accepted into an organization dedicated to peace when they want war so badly. Girl, they want to go in there and fuck shit up. That's what they want. Are you in favor of Western trade relations with Red China or with any other communist countries? No. The U.S. has been criticized at various times for its support of dictatorial regimes such as that of Franco Spain simply because they are anti-communist. What are your feelings? Some countries at certain times need dictatorships. Oh, do they? As for Franco, I feel that he has done a lot for Spain and its people. I am shocked. Are you deeply and personally interested in international politics? Yes and no. I sort of get disgusted. Yeah, girl. I can only go along so far. People do such foolish things and then I lose interest, right? I feel like I don't even watch the news these days. Like, I want to be informed, but it's just such a ridiculous flying umbrella. There's no point to it. God, I have to have peace and sleep at night. Okay, and then they talk about Monaco politics for a minute, and I don't know any of that, so. We understand Onassis, or I think they're talking about the same Onassis of Jackie O fame, or perhaps his father. We understand Onassis also opposes Prince Rainier's to popularize Monte Carlo to attract the tourist trade. Are you on speaking terms with Onassis? Yes, though I haven't seen him in several months. It's mostly a business feud, isn't it? Oh, yes. Maria Callas is a mutual friend of yours in Onassis. What do you think of her as a singer and a person? I think she is a very great artist, and as a person, I find her to be nice, warm, very honest, forthright person. She says what she thinks and what she feels, which is a quality I admire very much. Do you do the same? Not quite as openly, perhaps. For diplomatic reasons? No, I think it's a question of temperament. What, don't you ever get your Irish up? Oh yes, that comes out all by itself. You said some time ago, we have lost the joy of creation and people have no challenges. What did you mean by that? I said that as far as modern day life is concerned. For a woman today, there aren't as many challenges to one's creative instincts as before. I mean, everything is made too easy. Maybe for you, princess. It has to be because the modern woman has so much to do. She has not only to be a wife and mother, cook and housekeeper, but many other things. I think that the American woman does it better than most anyone else, although it's happening all over the world now too. When we live at such a rapid pace that there isn't enough time to enjoy everyday pleasures. I don't think I knew what she was talking about there. You have described yourself as a pessimist, are you really? Yes, I guess it's a kind of inverted optimism. Because when I'm pessimistic, I expect the worst, and then when it doesn't happen, I have a nice surprise. Are you happy then? Well, I don't expect to be. I don't look for happiness. So perhaps I am very content in life in a way. How would you define happiness? I suppose being at peace with yourself, not anxiously seeking for something, not being frantic about not having something. Are you at peace with yourself? Well, I understand myself, but I argue with myself all the time, so I guess I'm not really at peace. Have you ever felt the need for a psychiatrist? Oh, Playboy just went there. Oh my god. Well, for the moment, I seem to be getting along all right. So far, so good. Since you haven't found peace of mind, what do you think will help you achieve it? Well, I have many unfulfilled ambitions in life. If, God willing, I can keep my health and strength and manage to pull myself out of bed in the morning, some of them may be realized. What dreams in your life have not been realized? Like, what? You're a movie star and a princess. There is nothing that you cannot do, I feel like. Crazy. That's crazy. That was a fascinating, wild ride. Oh my gosh, for Princess Grace of Monaco. Also, I think this is going to be a good stopping point because, gee, we're already at 54 minutes. And I did not intend to make it that long, but it's just so good. I didn't want to skip through it, and that's just probably the only time we're gonna get an interview in Playboy from a princess, from Princess Grace. That was just too good for me to leave out. So, thank you so much for stopping by for this Playboy review. 1966, January. Next time we will be going over the same thing, but there's a lot more. We still haven't covered the Playmate of the Month. There's a whole Playmate review coming up, so there's 12 more girls in there. There's the pictorial about the Chicago mansion. It had just been opened up around this time. There's some great articles. There's a whole lot more to cover in this. So thank you so much, friends and neighbors, for stopping by for this review, and I will get part 2 posted up pretty quickly here. I just wanted to chop it in half because that's so long. All right. Thank you, friends and neighbors. See you soon.